Alright, check it out. I've got a new tutorial coming at you. Had some requests to teach you guys a little bit about Vanishing Point 3Ds. Now this is a great way to make your piece stand off the page a little bit better. And maybe let's take a browse through maybe some old sketches of mine that use that to introduce the style to you. Here's a good one, real straightforward and laid up. We've got some drop shadow here off to the right, but in theory all these lines are actually going to be converging to a single point. That's going to add some crazy nice depth to your piece. Let's see if we got anything else in here. I thought this piece was actually in this same black book, but here's a better example of that. You can see we've got lines all coming in towards this central point. It's going to really bring your piece off the page. I know I'm guilty of saying this too, but it's like adding weight or depth to your piece. It really lets your letters that are ultimately flat have some kind of context with the background. Even if, like this, there's nothing in the backdrop, it's literally just the letters and then some colored hit-ups. It adds a lot of kind of shading and values. This one in particular, I also shaded, but it's going to work great even without that. For me, I think it adds a ton to the piece and gives you a ton of versatility. Here you can see a little bit different of one where I'm actually got a vanishing point to the top. So there's a ton of little tricks that you can do with this. So I'm going to get into it and teach you about it. So in my last tutorial I taught you about some structure of the letter, and in this tutorial I'm just going to go right into it. So if you're curious about how I like to start off my letters, go check that video out. It actually goes into the letter B pretty specifically, so that'll help you too. Today I think I'm going to start off with why not doing letter C next. So I wanted to take a second to drop in the sponsor of this video. Skillshare has reached out through supporting the channel and sponsoring this video. Skillshare is an online learning center where you can get tons of different videos and classes on a huge range of topics. So unlike just the few tutorials I might put out a year, there's over 25,000 different tutorials and classes on Skillshare. This also covers tons of different topics like design, business, and I even found some on calligraphy that I'm super interested in. So whether it's art or not, there's always something new to learn, and Skillshare is helping promote that with a 2 free-month trial to the first 500 people that sign up through the link in the description. And if you like it enough after those couple free months, they have annual subscriptions for less than $10 each month. So you don't have anything to lose. Go check out all that crazy content they have over there. I'm sure it'll keep you busy for a full 2 months. And be sure to follow that link if you're interested. Now let's get back to my tutorial. As I mentioned in that letter B video, you're going to want a pen that's much thinner than the final outline that you want. That way you can go back in and really tailor up these lines, give you some variable line thickness, and really make it a nice piece. Now I'm really just going through and doubling and tripling the line thickness around this entire outline, and you can see the weight in here is just so much better than that first original really skinny line. It too allows you to get almost some cut back looks and get some super thin sections in here and here. That way you can use the marker to kind of flare it out and slowly get a smaller and smaller line. Alright, so now that you've finished your outline, it's time to pick a point in your page that you want all your lines to actually go off to. So if you see, pick a point over here, every line I'm going to draw off the edge of my letter is going to kind of translate over to that and follow a contour. And that will be kind of the point in which your eye gets drawn to on the page and it looks where this letter is going to come out of. So for the letter C, it's kind of a hard stay. I could do one down here and look like it's growing off the bottom of the page. One over here could look like it's kind of coming off to the left at you. My common one that I like to do is kind of a central vanishing point. I mentioned that in this first piece, you can see it's central to the whole piece and these lines are all coming down together. Can't quite tell exactly where I put it, but in theory it's kind of all there and that looks like the piece is kind of growing up and out at you. So keep that in mind for your piece. Since we're doing a single letter, I think it's going to be a tad bit different. I think something maybe down over here would look nice, so the letter is kind of growing out that way, and then maybe a little lower would be nice as well, so we get some long extensions off of here. But a thing you also want to keep in mind is it's going to be a straight line from that point. So here with some of these kind of high detail points, if you pick a line
or a dot, I should say, your vanishing point all the way down here, these lines are basically non-existent. You're not going to have anything coming off this if your line's going straight down and into the body of the letter. So that way, with kind of piece style stuff, this looks really nice when you can emphasize kind of the different edges to each of these kind of hard cuts, because that'll actually bring the piece out, because you'll have an individual line at every kind of point. So every corner you'll have one, and that way each face will be shown. So I like to pick one that kind of emphasizes the piece as a whole, but also doesn't really limit some of these internal pieces, because some of those are super important with giving a little bit more and extra depth to the letter. So I think something over here to the right is going to be able to utilize all this information up in here. It's going to be able to pull from over there, and then even maybe some of these back ones on this side of the letter you'll actually be able to see come up and out. So that's important too. So let's pick maybe just here, and I'll make it extra dark so you can see it on camera, and then basically draw your line straight from every corner. And now I also like to do this after I've done my outline, because, you know, with that double outline technique, it does sometimes change a little bit from your original. So rather than having to do this step twice, it's kind of fun to get your outline down and then decide from there. So I got my point over here, and then I kind of just move the ruler in line with it and then draw my edge. You can see these ones are going to be super small. Get you a nice close-up look at that. So I've shaded this in a tad, and you can see it's very small in there, but even the smallest detail you gotta include. And sometimes in large straight sections where you don't actually have, you know, a corner to put this on, I like to do one kind of in the middle, and that's just a guideline for you later down the road. It doesn't make a ton of sense right now, but I'll be sure to include why I like those in a second. So it looks like I hit them all. Might add some extra ones in here just to give me some guide as well. Because these lines will slowly curve, so as you go around the piece, you can see the angle of this is changing. So if you have a large section like this, it's interesting to see that at the bottom here we're basically flat, but if we're up in this corner, you know, we've got a pretty significant angle change in there. So it's good to have a couple, you know, midway stations and midway stops to get an idea with how it's actually curving. So there's one option now is to actually just fill in this piece and leave all these vanishing points going to that central point. But if you actually end up cutting it at a specific length, so say, you know, ½ inch off the line here, and make this the edge, it's gonna make it cut off and look like you've got that 3D letter on there. So I'm just gonna pick a generic length. Normally I don't even measure this out. It's something I just kind of, you know, go off of. But here we've got, you know, basically guessed it at ½ inch. So I'm going to mark all these at the same distance. So I'm going to go into each of my lines and do a little point on each of these so you can see those, and then I'm going to connect it as if it's this same line here. So here we can see we got a nice little angle to that. I'm just going to run that line down. Same thing over here. So I actually forgot one in here. So I got the corner. I'll mark off my set distance. Now a lot of this is up to you and how you want to set the distance and how you want to actually make the drawing. So practice will definitely make this interesting, and you'll get a better idea how you want to design it down the road. And then having these midway lines, like I mentioned earlier, are going to make sections that are wide open and change contour quite a bit. Is going to give you kind of a guide with how you should draw around that. So as you can see, my dots are coming in like the curve and then back up. So I'll just have some, you know, midway stations to sketch that out. And obviously come back with your pen in the outline, and that'll make it, you know, even that much smoother. But as you can see, we've already got a ton of depth added to this C. So now measuring off this midline, you can see that my 3D is going to totally extend into the portion of the letter. You know, this line would theoretically be all the way out here. So that way I know this whole section is going to be, you know, part of the 3D. This is also kind of a dummy-proof version that if, you know, you kind of have a hard time visualizing the contour and as it extends out, it pretty much gives you a dotted line to follow as you go around. Now you can go in and erase out the extra portions of each line, and we'll get a better idea about it. Sometimes I like to leave the vanishing point here just to make sure I don't lose it, and just to be sure in case I need to come back or correct anything, it's going to be there for me.
Alright, so I also wanted to touch on how you can actually shade this 3D, help you out a little bit with that. So basically, you're going to start with your darkest section on the outside edge. So if you're thinking like this is casting a shadow and this is actually a 3D object, your light source is up over here, and that means over here is going to be the furthest from that light source. It's not going to be bouncing off the ground as much. But here, if you want to envision the ground up here, maybe this section that sees that edge as it comes back up is going to be a little bit lighter than something over here that's kind of shadowed by the whole letter.
And then also, these interior sections are going to be pretty cluttered in there. There's not going to be much light being able to find their way around the edge of the letter, so these are going to be super dark as well. So I'm going to start with some of my lighter grays and then work to darker. Also going to add some light hues in there so we get a little bit of color on this black and white piece. Now I'm also going to use the lighter shade of gray to help blend this in a little. Wet the page a tad, then come back here with the darker shade. And then you can see this area actually overlaps it, so I'll be sure to kind of almost give a shadow from this block and into that corner. And I think it's also important to come back in with your outline and try to get, just the edge of it blackened up again. So that's pretty much it. Just have to touch up maybe my edges as they bled out a little. But there you got a nice Vanishing Point 3D letter C. So I hope this tutorial was pretty easy to follow. I think this is a great skill to have, and it adds a ton of depth to my pieces, so I know you guys will be liking it too. As a quick recap, basically just pick a point off in 3D space and then draw a line from every edge and every corner of your letter down to that point. And then pick a length for your 3D. I chose about 1/2 inch in this case, and basically just drew a point 1/2 inch away from each of those lines, and that created my 3D shape. Followed the contour of the edge of the letter and kind of played connect the dots with all of those, and that built it up. And then lastly, kind of shaded it in with some varying values, so you got some deep dark sections where not a lot of light's getting to, and some brighter open-ended ones where you're getting a little bit more of that light shining in on the edge. As for supplies, Sharpies are always my go-to to start off my outline. And then for that 3D, I was using some Dick Blick Studio Art markers. These were the gray set, so I've basically got like 10% gray, 20% gray, all the way up to 90 and all the way black. So nice variations in shades, and you can use the lighter ones to kind of blend in your colors there. So altogether, real fair prices on the Dick Blick as well as great quality, so they've always stood by as some really solid graphic book markers. And then I don't know if you caught a little mistake at the tip of the C there, but I had to touch that up with my Molotov just to get it back to the perfect white page that we have here. So if you have any questions or future suggestions for other techniques that I kind of work on, feel free to leave those in the comment section down below. I look forward to seeing what you guys try out with this, and wish you the best of luck in trying out this new skill. I've got a few other graffiti tutorials that I've put out recently, some that go into how to structure a letter and then how to actually focus in on outlining a piece to give yourself the best benefit of the doubt and not limit yourself with the whole marker size that you're actually working with. So I'll leave that linked on screen right now so you can go check it out. Feel free to spray that like button if you enjoyed this video, and maybe check out some of the other videos that YouTube thinks you might like. That's going to do it for me, guys. Peace.